There's no room for you. The holiday memory that changed everything. Every December, while holiday commercials filled the airwaves with images of happy families in cozy sweaters, sipping cocoa by the fire, I packed my suitcase in silence. Not with excitement, but with quiet resignation. I was 30 years old, making good money in my marketing career and living alone in sunny Florida. Yet each year, I made the 900-mile drive across 4 states to my childhood home, carrying bags full of hand-picked gifts, and a lingering hope that maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. But deep down, I knew how it would go. My sister Lindsay and her husband Brad would arrive days before I did, greeted like royalty. Their kids, Chloe and Ethan, would take over the living room with their toys. Brad's parents and sister would occupy the guest rooms. And me, I'd be lucky to get a pillow on the floor, assuming Brad's sister hadn't already claimed the couch. One year, I walked in after an 11-hour drive to find my childhood bedroom taken over by strangers, my name nowhere on the sleeping chart my mom had taped to the fridge. "Oh," she said flatly, "you should have called ahead." Called ahead? To my parents' house? The first time it happened, I was 23. Fresh out of college, hopeful, and eager to be home for the holidays. I'd spent days shopping for gifts with my entry-level paycheck, wrapping them carefully in shiny red and gold paper. But when I arrived on Christmas Eve, exhausted from the road, my mother looked up from the sink and said, "There's no room for you." Just like that. No apology, no concern. Brad's family had arrived early and claimed all the space. I could either find a hotel or not stay at all. So I slept on a friend's couch that night, while the people who raised me laughed and toasted eggnog without me. And yet I came back the next year, and the year after that. Because that's what we're taught, right? You don't walk away from family. You try harder, be more helpful, more understanding, more patient. I told myself they were just overwhelmed, that maybe they didn't realize how hurtful it was. So I kept showing up. I helped in the kitchen without being asked. I bought better gifts. I even booked hotel rooms in advance, just in case. But every year, the same pattern repeated. I'd be greeted with lukewarm smiles. Put to work within 5 minutes of walking through the door. My job promotion was met with polite nods, then quickly dismissed in favor of yet another retelling of Brad's middle management accomplishments. If I brought a bottle of wine, it was too dry. If I brought dessert, it was too sweet. At dinner, I'd get squeezed in between the end of the table and a wall while everyone else talked over me like I wasn't even there. They never meant to be cruel, not in the traditional sense. They didn't scream or throw things. They simply acted like I didn't matter. What made it worse was that I wanted to matter. I kept hoping for that moment when my mom would pull me aside and ask how work was going, or when my dad would toast me at dinner, saying he was proud of the woman I'd become. But instead, they reserved their warmth and attention for Lindsay. Lindsay, who had a real family. Lindsay, who gave them grandkids. Lindsay, who could do no wrong. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who are supposed to love you and still feeling invisible. It's not like being alone in your apartment with takeout and Netflix, that kind of loneliness you expect. But when you're sitting in the house you grew up in, hearing stories about your sister's first steps while your own childhood memories get erased in real time, that kind of loneliness cuts deep. One Christmas, I tried to join a nostalgic conversation. "Remember when I stayed up to catch Santa?" I asked, smiling at the memory. My mom blinked. "Did you?" That was all. 3 words, and she was back to fussing over Lindsay's cranberry sauce. I started wondering, if I stopped coming, would they even notice? That question haunted me for years. I kept thinking that one day they'd realize what they were doing, that they'd miss me. But each year, the message stayed the same. There's no room for you. They didn't mean space, they meant belonging. And it wasn't just physical, though sleeping at the Holiday Inn while strangers got my bed certainly made a point. It was emotional, spiritual, familial. I was the extra, the afterthought, the one who didn't quite fit no matter how hard I tried. Looking back, I wish I'd spoken up sooner. I wish I'd told them how much it hurt. But the truth is, I didn't want to seem dramatic. Or worse, ungrateful. So I smiled through the discomfort, laughed when they laughed, passed the mashed potatoes, and swallowed my pride. Until the year everything changed. And when it did, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't send a long, emotional letter. I simply said, "There's no room for you either." And I meant it. When home for the holidays meant nowhere to go, it was Christmas Eve again. Another year, another drive north. I had my usual reservation at the Holiday Inn, $129 a night with a modest breakfast buffet and enough space to lay my head without feeling like a burden. I'd wrapped gifts weeks in advance, labeled in metallic ink and tied with velvet ribbon. It didn't matter that they were never truly appreciated. I still believed in giving with heart. This time, I arrived just before sunset. The front porch light was already glowing, casting golden shadows across the snow-covered lawn. Inside, the house was full, again. Cars lined the driveway and even spilled into the cul-de-sac. I walked in, carrying 3 bags of presents, and was met with the usual commotion. Football blaring from the living room, laughter from the kitchen, the sharp clatter of china on tile. No one stopped to say hello, not really. A half-hearted "Hey, Rachel" from someone in the hallway, but mostly it was the same old pattern. I was invisible unless I was useful. "Good, you're here," my mom said, not even glancing up from the gravy pan. "Can you get the extra chairs from the garage?" "No." "How was your drive?" "No." "Need a glass of water?" Just a task, as always. I did what she asked, smiling politely, reminding myself that I was an adult now. This didn't have to hurt if I didn't let it. But the sting was always there, just beneath the surface. That ache you feel when you try to matter to people who've already decided you don't. Dinner came. I was wedged between Brad's sister and the corner of the dining room hutch, my knees practically touching the table leg. No one asked about my life, my job, or the big campaign I just landed with one of the fastest growing tech companies in the Southeast. But they did ask Brad about his leadership potential at his firm. They did fawn over Lindsay's kids and Brad's parents' cruise photos. I tried, like always, to insert myself, light jokes, a gentle, "that reminds me," but the current of conversation flowed around me like I wasn't there. Until finally, Brad's mom turned to me, wineglass in hand. "So, Rachel," she said, "what are you up to these days?" I smiled. Finally. A chance to be seen. "Actually, I was promoted this quarter. I'm now Senior Marketing Manager. I'm leading a new product launch across 6 states. She blinked once, then smiled thinly. "Oh, well, that's cute. I guess that's more creative stuff, huh? Not quite the same as real business." She turned to Lindsay mid-sentence. "So, how's Chloe doing in school?" Just like that, I vanished again. I didn't speak for the rest of the meal. By the time the clock crept toward midnight, I was numb. The voices, the laughter, the warmth, none of it reached me. I watched them pass plates and inside jokes. I watched my mom ruffle Lindsay's hair and reminisce about her childhood, as if I hadn't been there too. As if I hadn't been a part of this family all along. Still, I stayed. Because somewhere in me, there was a stubborn hope that at midnight, something would shift. That maybe, just maybe, tradition would win out over favoritism. That I'd get a hug, a kind word, a sliver of connection. And for a moment, it did happen. "Merry Christmas!" they all shouted. I got a hug from Dad, a side squeeze from Lindsay. Mom even smiled at me. My chest ached with the yearning of old wounds, but it didn't last. As I went to grab my overnight bag from the hallway, my mom followed me upstairs. "Actually, Rachel, I need to talk to you about tomorrow," she said. I turned around, hopeful again. Maybe we'd have a real conversation. "Well," she said, "it's probably better if you don't come by for gift exchange in the morning." I stared at her, frozen. "What?" "Aunt Carol's coming. And you know how things are between you two. It's just easier this way." Easier. That word hit like a slap. Easier. For who? For the aunt who had spent my entire teenage years insulting me? For the family who had watched it happen and punished me for standing up? "You're choosing her over me?" I asked. She looked away. "It's not about choosing sides, it's just more peaceful when you're not here." More peaceful. It was the moment I finally got it. I wasn't just forgotten. I was actively unwelcome. I nodded. "I won't come tomorrow?" She smiled, relieved. "Good. I knew you'd understand." Understand? I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip open every bottled hurt I had and make her look at it. But I didn't. I zipped up my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and said, "Drive safely, Mom. I hear the roads might be icy." I walked downstairs. Nobody noticed me leave. At the Holiday Inn, the desk clerk offered me a warm cookie and a Merry Christmas with more sincerity than my own mother. I sat on that clean white bed, kicked off my boots, and turned on a Hallmark movie. I ordered chocolate cake from room service. I watched snowflakes drift past the window, and I made a decision. I was done. Done with second-class treatment. Done with the one-sided loyalty. Done pretending that blood ties meant more than basic human decency. That night, for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. And in the morning, I got in my car and drove home. Not to my parents' house, but to Florida, to my future, to my own life. A life where I would never again be told, "There's no room for you." Reclaiming the narrative, my life, my home, my peace. The drive back to Florida the morning after Christmas felt different that year. The road was long, over 900 miles of asphalt, gas stations, and classic rock radio. But for the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by resentment. No guilt. No pressure to fake a smile or beg for scraps of affection. Just me, my old Honda Civic, and a quiet resolve humming beneath the surface like a new engine. I passed through Georgia just as the sun was rising, a soft pink glow stretching across the horizon like a promise. You don't have to go back, and I wouldn't. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex in Florida, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. It was like waking up from a bad dream that had lasted a decade. I unpacked slowly, set my suitcase in the corner, and turned off my phone. I didn't need their calls, their guilt, their justifications. What I needed was a new chapter. For years, I had been saving, quietly, diligently. While my parents fawned over my sister's expanding family, I was maxing out my Roth IRA, skipping unnecessary splurges, and building an emergency fund. While they threw graduation parties and baby showers, I was watching interest rates and listening to real estate podcasts during my morning runs. It had been 8 years of sacrifice. 8 years of saying no to Florida beach weekends and spontaneous trips to Nashville with friends. But now I was ready to say yes, to myself. It started with one text to my friend Tyler, a local realtor I'd known since my early marketing days. "Me. I'm ready. I want to buy a house." He called within minutes. "Are you serious?" he asked. "As a heart attack," I said, smiling. Within a week, we were touring properties. I told him I wanted space, not just a place to live, but to breathe. 4 bedrooms, if possible, close to the ocean. A yard big enough for barbecues and maybe even a hammock under a palm tree. And, most importantly, a house that felt like mine, not borrowed, not temporary, not a place I had to apologize for occupying. It took a month, 23 showings, and one emotional breakdown in a kitchen with outdated linoleum. But then, we found it. A 2-story home just 10 minutes from the Gulf, with creamy stucco walls, a wraparound porch, and a backyard pool that shimmered like a sapphire in the sunlight. Inside, it had granite countertops, hardwood floors, a breakfast nook that caught the morning light perfectly, and a master suite with French doors that opened toward the sea breeze. The moment I walked through the door, I knew this was mine. The closing process was stressful. Paperwork, inspections, lender hoops, but I handled it all like a pro. I'd spent so long holding everyone else's emotional baggage that navigating real estate contracts almost felt easy in comparison. And then, on a crisp March afternoon, Tyler handed me the keys. "Welcome home," he said, his voice catching just a little. I stood in the center of the empty living room, barefoot on freshly polished floors, and let out a long breath. This wasn't just a house. It was my redemption arc, my reward, my declaration to the universe that I was no longer anyone's afterthought. The next few weeks were a blur of delivery trucks, paint swatches, and more trips to Home Goods than I care to admit. I decorated exactly how I wanted. Soft blues, clean whites, touches of gold. The guest rooms were outfitted with plush bedding and fresh flowers. One room became a craft studio where I finally had space to create again. Another became a home office, complete with a glass desk and the corner window I'd always dreamed of. And then I threw a housewarming party. I invited coworkers, neighbors, and my closest friends. We grilled burgers by the pool, toasted champagne under the string lights I'd strung across the patio, and played Christmas music just for fun, because who says joy has a season? No one asked why my family wasn't there. No one judged. They just smiled and said, "We're so proud of you." That night, as I closed the front door and locked it behind me, I stood in the quiet foyer of my home and realized something simple but profound. This was what belonging felt like. It wasn't about childhood photos on mantles or sharing DNA. It was about being seen, being valued, being loved without conditions or comparisons. In this house, there would always be room for people who respected me, for laughter that didn't require pretending, and for the woman I had become. So when my mom eventually called to ask why I hadn't invited them, or why I didn't tell them I'd bought a house, I didn't explain or defend myself. I simply said, I made room for peace this time. And I meant it. When they finally noticed me, it was too late. By summer, life in my new home had become something close to perfect. Mornings began with coffee on the porch, listening to waves crash in the distance. Weekends were spent gardening, hosting brunch with friends, or floating in my pool with a book in one hand and a glass of wine in the other. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. I hadn't heard from my parents in months, not since that Christmas when I quietly slipped out of their house and into my own life. Sure, I'd sent a generic happy birthday text to Mom in April, and one to Lindsay in May. No replies, no, how are you? No questions about work or the house. And honestly, I hadn't expected any. They'd made their position clear long ago. Unless I had kids, a husband, or fit neatly into their image of what a daughter should be, I was background noise. Tolerated, occasionally useful, but never celebrated. Then came the phone call. It was mid-November. I had just finished a client pitch call and was heating up leftover lasagna when I saw Mom on my screen. I hesitated. Curiosity won out. "Hi, Mom." There was a pause, then a voice, soft, oddly hesitant. "Hi, Rachel. I wanted to talk to you about Christmas. I raised an eyebrow. Christmas? Yes, well, Aunt Carol's planning to visit again. And with Lindsay and the kids and Brad's family, it's just going to be, well, a lot of people at our place again. The house is getting so cramped these days. There it was. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. So what does that have to do with me? Well, she said with a sudden chirpiness, we were thinking it might be nice to celebrate Christmas at your house this year. I stared at the phone like it had grown legs and walked away. Wait, I said slowly. You want to come to my house for Christmas? Yes, wouldn't that be lovely? All of us together in Florida. We've already talked it through and everyone's excited. Me, your dad, Lindsay and Brad and the kids, even Aunt Carol. We booked flights and... I cut her off with a short laugh. You what? She hesitated. We booked flights just last night. I put the phone on speaker and sat down, stunned. They hadn't even asked, just assumed, just like they always had. Mom, I said carefully, you're calling to inform me that you're all coming to stay at my house for Christmas? Well, we figured it was the perfect solution. You have all that space now, and it would mean so much to the family, especially the kids. They've never been to Florida during the holidays. And you never thought to check if I had plans? If I even wanted visitors? A pause. Rachel, it's Christmas. Family belongs together. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. That's funny. You didn't think that last year when you told me not to come. Silence. You remember, don't you? I continued. You told me to stay away because Aunt Carol didn't want to see me. Now she's welcome in my home. It's not the same, she said quickly. You have such a beautiful place now. Everyone's really looking forward to it. I felt the anger flicker in my chest, but it wasn't hot. It was cold, controlled. Well, I said, voice calm. Unfortunately, there's no room. She blinked through the phone. What? There's no room, Mom. I'm hosting friends. My guest rooms are full. I don't have space for 8 extra people, and frankly, I don't want the chaos. But we've already packed. We bought plane tickets. You should have asked before assuming you were invited. You don't mean that, she whispered. I do, I replied. For years, you made it clear I didn't belong. Now that I have something you want, suddenly you remember I exist? Number, I'm done. I hung up. The silence in my kitchen was loud, but it wasn't lonely. That night, my phone buzzed with messages from Lindsay. What the hell is wrong with you? You're being selfish. We're your family. I read them all, and then I replied, for years, you had no room for me. Now I have none for you. Merry Christmas. And then I blocked the number. 2 weeks later, they posted a photo from my parents' house on Facebook. Everyone looked miserable. The caption, Christmas didn't turn out how we planned. Some people just disappoint you. I laughed out loud. For once, I wasn't the one being disappointed. The last call, ending the cycle. Once and for all. The funny thing about silence is how peaceful it becomes once you realize it's not a punishment, but a boundary. After Christmas came and went without a single knock at my door, I felt lighter than I had in years. My friends and I grilled shrimp on the patio, drank mulled wine under the string lights, and played board games well into the night. There were no fake smiles, no tension at the dinner table, no need to fight for a seat or someone's attention. Just warmth, just joy, just people who chose me, not out of obligation, but out of love. I thought that would be the end of it, but toxic family rarely exits quietly. It was the Tuesday after Christmas, and I was sipping coffee while answering work emails when my phone rang. Unknown number. I never answer unknown numbers, but something, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, made me tap accept. Rachel, It was a voice I hadn't heard in years, but could still recognize instantly. Aunt Carol. My stomach turned, but my voice stayed steady. "How did you get my number?" "Your mother gave it to me," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She's heartbroken, Rachel, and frankly, I don't blame her. I let the silence stretch. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing," she continued, "but the way you treated your family over the holidays was disgraceful. They flew down expecting to see you—" I cut her off, cool and firm. "Expecting. That's the key word, isn't it?" She ignored me and charged ahead. "They saved money for that trip. Your father even canceled his golf weekend. And then you slammed the door in their faces? What kind of daughter does that?" I stood up from my desk, walking toward the glass doors that opened to my backyard. The sun was shining on the pool. A soft breeze rustled the palms. This was my life now. Calm. Chosen. "The kind of daughter," I said slowly, "who finally learned to stop setting herself on fire to keep everyone else warm." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "This boundaries nonsense you've picked up. What a selfish way to live." That did it. My jaw tightened, but my voice stayed even. "You want to talk about selfish, Carol? Let's talk. Let's talk about Easter when I was 15 and you stood in my parents' living room calling me fat in front of everyone. Let's talk about how you said I looked unkempt. How I'd never be as pretty or smart as Lindsay." "Now, I'm not finished," I snapped, my voice sharper now. "Let's talk about how, when I finally stood up for myself, my parents punished me, not you. You threw a tantrum and refused to attend family gatherings if I was there, and they chose you." "That's not how I remember it," she muttered. "Of course it's not, because you've never been on the receiving end. You've always been the one holding the knife, not the one bleeding." She was quiet now, but I wasn't done. "You didn't call to apologize. You called to scold, to guilt trip, to reassert control. But here's the thing. This isn't your stage anymore. I'm not a scared teenager desperate for approval. I'm a woman who bought her own house, built her own life, and surrounded herself with people who actually respect her. You're turning your back on your family." "No," I said. "You all turned your backs on me years ago. You just didn't think I'd ever stop crawling after you." There was a pause, so long I thought she might have hung up. But then she hissed, "You'll regret this. Families don't last when one person cuts the cord." I smiled. "Some cords are meant to be cut." And I hung up. Just like that, the final string unraveled. The final voice of that toxic chorus fell silent. I blocked her number, then I called my phone carrier and changed my number entirely. I sent it to my friends, my boss, and the people who mattered. Everyone else could stay in the past, where they belonged. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of being the bad daughter or the distant one. I wasn't afraid of what the neighbors or the extended cousins might say. I had no interest in defending my choices to people who had never defended me. That spring, I planted a lemon tree in my backyard. There was something poetic about that, growing something sharp and bright in the soil of a new beginning. The months that followed were the best of my adult life. I joined a local hiking group, started pottery classes at a community center, took a weekend trip to Charleston just because I felt like it. I laughed more, slept better. I no longer spent Sunday evenings dreading the next holiday phone call. My peace became my rhythm, my home, my sanctuary. Sometimes people ask if I regret cutting them off. I don't. I regret waiting so long to believe I deserved better. Because the truth is, family isn't who shares your last name or your old photo albums. Family is who shows up for you consistently, who cheers for your wins without making it about themselves, who listens, really listens, when you speak. And in this new life I've built, I've got plenty of room for that kind of family. The other kind? There's no room anymore. Not in my house. Not in my heart. Not ever again. Peace was never in their house. It was in mine. I used to think peace would come when they finally saw me, when my parents would one day look at me across the holiday table and say, "We're proud of you, Rachel." When Aunt Carol would offer even a hint of remorse. When Lindsay would stop comparing lives and start offering kindness, but that moment never came. And now, I'm thankful it didn't. Because waiting for someone else to value you is a prison of your own making. You decorate it with polite silence and forced smiles. You keep hoping if you just work harder, give more, stay quiet longer, they'll let you in. But I stopped waiting, and in the quiet that followed, I found everything I thought I needed from them, right here in the life I built for myself. These days, I wake up to sunlight spilling through my bedroom window, ocean breeze slipping through sheer curtains I chose myself. I make French press coffee in my kitchen, the one with the granite countertops I saved for years to afford. My dog, Milo, follows me around the house with his tail wagging like I'm the most important person in the world. Because to him, I am. I no longer dread the holidays. In fact, I look forward to them. Not because of family traditions long laced with disappointment, but because I now create my own traditions. Bonfires in the backyard, movie marathons with friends, homemade cinnamon rolls, and laughter that fills every corner of this house. My phone doesn't ring with guilt anymore. My inbox isn't filled with half-hearted apologies or backhanded invitations. And my heart, it no longer aches to be let in, because I've already arrived, right here in the life I chose. I still think about them sometimes. I wonder if Lindsay ever tells the full story, if Mom ever replays the last conversation in her mind, if Dad ever asks, "Where did we lose her?" But those thoughts pass like clouds across the sky. They drift in, then out, and I let them go. Because peace isn't passive. It's not something handed to you by people who once ignored your pain. Peace is earned by choosing yourself over and over again, no matter who walks away. I'm not the girl in the hallway with a suitcase anymore. I'm not the one they forgot to make space for. I'm the woman who made space for herself, who turned absence into abundance and silence into sanctuary. So if you've ever been made to feel like an afterthought, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me. You don't need their permission to matter. You already do. And sometimes walking away isn't giving up. It's coming home. This deeply moving story offers a powerful reminder that belonging is not something you beg for. It's something you build for yourself. For many middle-aged Americans, especially those who have spent years prioritizing family at the cost of personal peace, this message hits home. The most profound lesson here is that setting boundaries is not selfish, it's survival. For too long, the narrator tolerated emotional neglect, hoping her loyalty would earn her love. But true family, chosen or blood, should never make you feel invisible. By finally saying, "There's no room," she didn't close the door on love. She opened it for self-respect, healing, and peace. This story urges us to redefine what home and family mean, especially as we age. It's not about who raised you, it's about who respects you. You have every right to walk away from people who diminish you, even if they share your DNA. And maybe the most liberating truth? You don't need anyone's permission to choose yourself. You've earned it. You always have. Let that be the legacy you build, one where there is always room for peace, dignity, and the life you deserve.